Yeah, okay. Please subscribe to DBS Talks. In this channel, you are having so much educational related videos. So please inform to your friends to subscribe. Now let us get into our topic. Yeah, okay. These are about some transaction flow techniques. How, first of all, how you have to get the transaction flow techniques, let us see. For a particular system, to test a particular software, you have to perform some transactions there. Before going to perform the transaction, first of all you have to check what are the transaction flow, what is the transaction flow in that particular code. Here in the transaction flow, what are the even in the type of transaction flow also, what are the testing techniques that you are going to apply there. Also you have to check once in that particular transaction flow testing techniques, what are the things that, what are the process that we are going to follow here. Let us see. Okay, see, here, if in complicated systems, the process that process a lot of difference, it is a complicated transactions. If you are having some complicated transactions and we are having some explicit representations of the transaction flows, when it is equivalent, at that particular time, at that particular point of view, we are going to get the transaction flow. See, if it is a complicated system, just like if you are performing some transactions, there the particular system is some complicated system, then to process that particular type of complicated system, first of all you have to perform a lot of different types of, first of all you have to perform different types of transactions there. In order to perform the transactions also, you have to explicit some representations of the transaction flows. Even you have to perform the equivalent type of transaction flows there. Here in those complicated systems, we are having a lot of difference there. We are having a lot of difference when compared with the complicated transactions also. Whenever you are going to perform the transaction, you have to repeat the you have to repeat the you have to process you have to repeat the process of testing. Why? Because if the testing process is successfully completed, then only it will be then only we can say that it is successfully performing any transactions. But here, in this particular type of systems, it is very difficult to process, and there is a lot of difference between the complicated transactions, and it should have the explicit representations of the transaction flows. Suppose transaction, we are having some transaction flow, like to show the transaction flow. In order to show the transaction flow, we are writing the flow graphs there. We are writing the flow graphs there. To write that flow graphs, consequently we should expect and have them, and we should increase the levels in detail. Suppose to do the transaction, like if it is a control flow graph, first of all in that flow graph you have to mention where the process is being starting there. After that what is the process that we are going to execute there. After that, what are the different types of computations that we are going to perform, and where are the logical operations, all we have to take into the picture. And based upon that we are going to draw the flow graph for that particular transaction. See, transaction flows like the control flow graphs, and consequently we should expect to have them in increasing. We are going to increase it in increasing levels day by day. By using that, we are going to increase the levels. And based upon the system documentation also, it should compulsory, it should maintain an overview section, that it should not follow any type of these type of consequences just like that. But the systems design documentation, it should contain an overview section, that the details, it should maintain the transaction flows there. It should definitely maintain the transaction flows. And here, see, if you are going to take the overview, the overview section, we are going to maintain the transaction flows there. But the systems design documentation should contain an overview section. it contains an overview, and it contains a section like, and it contains the details of main transaction flows. But the systems design documentation is somewhat different, and it should contains an overview section, and it details the main transaction flows there. But here, when it comes to detailed transaction flow, those are mandatory and prerequisite to the rational design of a system's functional test. In order to perform the if you are going to perform the system's functional test, the detailed flow are mandatory, and it will be prerequisite to the rational design of the system's functional test. Whenever you are going to perform a functional test, then it will be a detailed transaction, and it will be just like, we should perform the design of a system functional test. Next one. See what are the inspections, reviews, and walkthroughs in this particular flow of transaction flows. Whenever you are performing the transaction flow, in order to perform the transaction flow, what are the inspections, and what are the reviews, and what are the walkthroughs that we are going to apply there? Let us see. Okay, here in the transaction flows are a natural these are the natural agenda for the system reviews or the inspections. In order to perform the system reviews or inspections, these are the this will be transaction flow considered as the basic natural agenda for the system reviews or the inspections. In conducting the walkthroughs, in order to conduct that walkthroughs, you should what you have to do is, you should discuss enough transaction types to account first of all, you are going to perform a transaction on that particular type of data. First of all, you have to take that one as a natural basic agenda. For the systems, for the basic systems itself, you have to consider it as a natural agenda. Okay, and for the inspections also you have to perform. In order to conduct the walkthroughs, you have to perform the basic you have to discuss enough transaction types to the account. For example, if you are going to perform these transactions, these are the transaction flows are the natural agenda for the system reviews or the inspections. In order to perform that system reviews or inspections, you have to take these transaction flows as a you have to discuss enough transaction types to account. For example, if you are going to perform these things, then basically from 98% to 99% of the per transaction, it should be either expected or unexpected to the process. We can't say it compulsory. We can't say that it should be explicit or like that. It should be expected process there. And the paths, we should discuss the paths through the flows in the functional rather than the technical terms. In order to we are going to perform it in the terms of functional terms or in the technical terms, and we are going to ask the designers to relate every flow. First of all, whether in the transaction, whenever each and every flows are relating to each other, then automatically we will ask the person who is going to design that particular transaction flow, to denote the transaction flow. We have to design first of all, we have to design the flow graph. Why? Because based upon that flow graph itself, we are going to check whether whatever the bugs or whatever the key features that we have missed, and what are the basic things that we have missed itself, in the flow graph itself we are going to check there. Okay, in the graph itself we are going to check each and everything there. So for that reason itself, first of all we have to ask the designer whether it is performing the rather based upon the technical terms and as in the functional terms. You have to maintain the discussion with the designers who are going to design that particular transaction flow, and you have to ask the designers to relate each and every flow to the specification, and you have to show the transaction directly or indirectly, and you have to follow up from the requirements. Okay, and based upon these things, you have to first of all you have to ask the designers To relate, first of all, relate means what are the relations in between transaction to transaction. What is the what is the basic relation between the each transaction to the transaction. What is the relation between these transaction and that transaction? You have to check once first, and uh, you have to ask the designers to perform. You have to ask the designer that to perform the uh, directly or you have to relate the each and every specification, and you have to make the transaction for each and every corner, and you have indirectly follow from the requirements. However, you have to make these things very basic. You have to consider it one as a basic things, and you can say that you can say like this is the basic functional testing and just as the path testing. In order to in order to, you can say it as a cornerstone of the unit testing. Okay. And here uh, you have already said you have to ask the designers to let every flow and to specification, and to show how the transaction is directly or indirectly flow from the requirements. But here first of all, after doing this, first you have to make the transaction flow testing from the cornerstone system to the functional testing, just as a path testing. Just as a path testing, you have to take it as a cornerstone of the unit testing, and you have to select the additional flow paths. You have to select what are the additional flow paths that we are going to take, and you have to select the loops and extreme values and domain boundaries. You have to select each and everything. And next one is you have to design the more test cases and to validate all the births and deaths where the transaction is started. The transaction where it is started, we can say it as a birth. The transaction where it is ended, we can say it as a death. Okay. So based upon these things, you have to consider uh, where it births and deaths is happening there. And here you have to take it one as a make we have to make the transaction at a cornerstone of the system, and based upon the functional testing just as a path testing, and we have to consider the each and every path of the unit test also. And you have to design the more test cases to validate all births and tests. Based upon the test cases itself, you have to validate where the process transaction has been started and where the process transaction has been ended. Based upon this itself, we can claim to a conclusion. And we can select an additional flow paths for the loops and for the extreme values and for the domain boundaries. And you have to select the additional flow paths for the loops, extreme values and the domain boundaries also. We have selected the additional flow paths, and we can you can design more test cases to validate all births and deaths. Okay, to validate that births and deaths, we can design the more test cases. And to publish and distribute the selected test paths also through the transaction flows. Through the transaction flows itself, we can publish and distribute the selected test paths and as early as possible, so that they will exert the minimum beneficial effect on the project. Now see here how we are going to select that particular path. In order to select that particular path, first of all you have to select a set of covering paths. We can consider that one as a C1, first path is C1 and second one as C2, and combining these two things, C1 plus C2, we are going to cover those paths by using the analogous criteria. By using some analogous criteria, we are going to cover that particular path, and it is used for the structural path testing. Whatever that is used for the structural path testing, we are going to use it. Next we are going to next thing is you are going to select a covering set of paths based on the functionally sensible transactions. Based on the sensible transactions, whatever it is, we are going to you would use for the control flow graphs, and whatever the basic whatever the things that you are going to use it. Let us see. First of all, you have to select a covering set of paths based upon the functionally sensible transactions, as you would for the control flow graphs. Okay. what are you are going to do for the control flow graphs? You have to select for the covering set of paths based on the functionally sensible transactions. Okay, next one, you have to try to find the most tortuous, longest and strongest path from the entry to the exit of the transaction flow. See, from the entry, the process where it starts, we can say it as the birth of that particular transaction. Okay, from the entry to the exit, that is the death of that particular transaction. From the starting to the ending, you have to find out the what are the most longest and strongest path. Strongest means if it is a very effective path, then only we can select that path. Based upon that selection of path itself, we are going to find out the find out the destination very easily. If it is not an strongest or longest path, it is very difficult to find out that path. It is very difficult to find out that path. Okay, so what they are saying here is, path selection, in the time of path selection, you have to select the set of covering paths using the analogous and criteria by using the structural path testing, and and in order to select a covering set of path based upon the functionally sensible transaction, you can do it for the control flow graphs, and you can try to find out the most longest and shortest path from the entry to the exit of the transaction flow. Okay, these are the things that we are going to perform when you are going to do the path selection. Okay, now let us see how we are going to sensitize a path. In order to sensitize a path, most of the normal paths are very easy to sensitize, that is from 80 to 95%. Here the transaction flow coverage is usually easy to achieve. It is very easy to achieve. But here, what is the normal path and what is the critical path, and what is the sensitizable path, and what is the transaction flow path, what are the normal paths that we have to consider, you have to see first. See here, here the basically most of the normal paths, what are the normal paths you are having, that most normal paths are very easy to sensitize. Sensitize means we can reduce that particular path very easily. Why? Because it is a basic normal path there, and up to 80% it can be sensitized, and here 95% the transaction flow coverage is usually it is very easy to achieve. It can be very easy to achieve. The remaining small percentage is very often difficult. It is very often difficult, and it is a very small percentage there. But here, based upon this criteria also, we can say that it is very easy to sensitize, but the transaction flow, the remaining all small percentages are very difficult. But here the sensitization is the act of defining the transaction. See, whenever you are going to define the transaction, it is it is act of defining the transaction. Okay, whenever suppose some transaction is going on in the process, in that particular transaction, we are if you are defining some if you are defining some transaction means in a flow of process, if you are going to define some transaction means we can say that it is a act of sensitization. Okay, if there are if we are having some any kind of that sensitization problems, then we can do the transactions, where we can do the transactions, and if there are having some sensitization on that path, and on easy paths we can easily carry that problems there, and then bet an either bug in the transaction flows or a design bug. But based upon this, we can say that most of the normal paths are very easy. It is very easy to sensitize, and here up to 80 to 95% the transaction flow is usually it is very easy to achieve. And here whatever we have left, the remaining small percentage is very often difficult. It is very often to difficult. And here the most of the normal paths are very easy to sensitize there. Excuse me. Here the remaining small percentage is also very often very difficult. And here the sensitization is the act of defining the transaction, and if there are sensitization problems on easy paths, then bet if it is either transaction flow or if it is design bug, then we are going to bet it once. Why? Because it is the act of designing defining the transaction. If there are sensitization problems on the EC paths, then we can bet on either bug or in the transaction flows during whenever you are going to perform a design test using the design. So we can say it as a transaction flow or a design bug. Okay, this is about path sensitization. Okay, then go for the next slide. See, instrumentation is playing a bigger role in the transaction flow testing than the unit path testing. Whenever you are what is a unit testing means, if it is a whenever you are going to divide the program into some modules, each and every module we can consider that as a unit. In order to do that, first of all you have to perform the unit testing. See, it is playing a bigger role in the transaction flow testing. Here it is a path instrumentation. Here the instrumentation is going to play a bigger role in the transaction flow testing than a unit path testing. When compared with the transaction flow testing and unit path testing, instrumentation is playing somewhat bigger role here. It is playing bigger role in the transaction flow testing. When compared with the unit path testing, the instrumentation is playing a major role in the transaction flow testing. See, wherever the transaction is different thing, from beginning to ending it is having some transaction, and in modules also, in each and every modules also it is having some transactions there. But here when it comes to the transaction flow techniques, there the instrumentation is playing a major role. Why? Because whenever you are going to perform the transaction flow, it is somewhat difficult to find that it is just difficult to find the instrumentation path, and it is the instrumentation is playing a bigger role. Why? Because the information of the path can be taken for a given transaction, and we must keep that with the transaction, and can be recorded by a central transaction dispatcher or by the individual process modules. However, you are having some individual process modules there, but when compared with normal thing, here the information of the path, whatever the path you are going to take, the information of that particular path should be given for a given transaction. The information of the particular path for a given transaction must be kept with that transaction, and can be recorded by the central transaction dispatcher, and it can be or by the individual process modules. So basically two things. Here we are going to convert these two things into that particular thing into this thing, and this one, and that means both are going to exchange its properties. Here both are going to exchange its properties there. Here, and the information of that particular path, and the transaction, and these transactions can be recommended. Basically it is recommended from starting to the ending, I think. Here, and the recommended flow also, in the recommended path flow also, it is playing a bigger role in the transaction flow than the unit path testing. But the information of the path taken for a given transaction also must be kept with the transaction and can be recorded by the central transaction dispatcher by the individual process modules. By the single, this is not a single, but by using the information of the path, uh, basically the information of the path also taken from the, it should be also taken from the given transaction and must be kept with the transaction and can be recorded by the central transaction it will be automatically it will be recorded by the central transaction dispatcher or by the individual processing modules. So it is the information of the path token for the given transactions must be, it should be kept with the transaction and it can be recorded by the central interaction and by using the dispatcher there, and they're also by using the some process modules also they're going to perform. But in some systems this tracing is not provided by the operating systems. We are going to perform our own tracing. In some particular type of operating systems, the tracing is provided. Whenever the operating system is running, we can provide our own tracings. But even if it is in the offline also, it is even if it, in the process also it is performing that same thing, and such traces also provided by the operating systems or by the running systems there. This is about the path instrumentation. Go for the next slide. Now let us see how we are going to perform some data flow testing. See, it is a name data flow testing means we are going to perform the testing on some particular flow of data. See, whenever you are going to perform the testing in some particular flow of data, you have to perform the test. Suppose it how the name is coming name had came to that particular test process means whenever you are going to perform data flow testing is a name, it is given to a family of the test strategies. If whenever it is having a family of test strategies, based upon the test strategies, the data flow is a name given for the family of the test repository. It basically based upon these selecting paths, we are through the control flow graphs based upon the selecting paths through the program's control flow. In order to explore the sequences of the events related, in order to do that, the events related to the status of data objects, whatever the status is related to the data objects, the event should be related to the status of the data object there. But the data flow testing is a why you can say it as a data flow testing means it is a name given to the family of test strategies, and it is based upon the selecting paths through the programming control flow in order to explore the sequences of events, and it is related to the status of the data objects. If you have considered some example, for example, if you have taken the enough paths, after taking that enough paths to assure that every data object has been initialized prior to use. If it prior itself it is initialized, if the data object is prior initialized, you can easily use that data object. There is nothing to do refuse it, that nobody refuse that, and nothing is in that. But here, and it is the data object there. Whenever you are going to perform that, we can pick the enough paths to ensure that every data object is here has been initialized to prior to use, or that all the different objects have been used for something, for some purpose also they are using that data flow testing. Okay, just for not for do the data that not for defining the objects and not for doing something, you have to whatever the basic thing that you have suppose if it is starting, it is initialized starting itself. Even if you are going to take that particular type of data object, you can pick that path where it is. After picking the path, we can assure that each and every data object is initialized. After picking, immediately the basic thing you have to do is you have to check whether the object has been initialized or not. You have to take the CHI. Then for example, you can pick the enough paths to ensure that every data object has been initialized. Here you are having some belief. Suppose you are initializing prior and you are using that all the defined objects you are using there, and it is used for something, and it have been used for something, and it is used for other thing. And it is our belief that just as one would not feel confident about the program without executing every statement, and it is as a part of some test, one should not feel confident about the program without running everyone should not be confident there, but one should feel confident about the program. He or she should be very confident. Why? Because by using the value produced by each and every computation, understand, it should be our belief that one would not feel confident about the program without executing every statement in it as a part of some test, but one should not feel confident about the program without having that seen the effect using the value produced by the each and every computation. Okay, this is about the data flow testing. In the next class we are going to continue the next topic. Okay, thank you.